All right, we are live. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Now, before we get into our main topic, I want to ask our listeners for reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening. The reviews really do help the show grow. And now that we're trying to put this out as a video podcast, sharing the video wouldn't hurt either. So YouTube share would be great because I bet the History Channel does not do live streams like this.
I bet they
We're
don't.
coming for them, as we tell you guys all the time. Also, this is going to be a double feature tonight. So if you want to hang out with us for a little while, we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to first kick off with the Battle of Bull Run.
The first Battle Bull Run.
And then we're going to move on to Roanoke and the Lost Colony there.
Yes.
So if you want to hang out with us for a little while, you got an evening to kind of hang out and talk history. I hope you guys join us. So Jen, why don't you get us started on kind of our first topic tonight, which is the first Battle of Bull Run and what we did there.
Sure. So this is Women's History Month, and the first Battle of Bull Run is very talked about.
Yeah.
I would say if you're a Civil War historian buff or just like to study the Civil War, first Battle of Bull Run is a very significant battle. I wouldn't say maybe not as popular as Gettysburg, but pretty popular.
It's a popular one. I mean, even from the average history student,
Sure,
who high school, maybe some history stuff in college, you're going to understand. You're going to be like, oh yeah, Battle of Bull Run. I've heard of that. I know it's a battlefield somewhere, and I know it's significant.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people realize it's the first significant battle of the Civil War. It's the one that really sets the stage for this being a drawn out Civil War.
Yep.
This is not going to be an easy victory for either side. It really does establish the need for not only fighters, but for a good understanding of warfare tactics.
Just planning in general. And the funny thing is, you mentioned that we've actually talked about Bull Run once or twice over this past month.
Yes.
Largely because of Rose Greenhow.
Because of Rose Greenhow.
Who was a Confederate spy.
Yeah, so that is why we did Bull Run, is Rose Greenhow's story kind of led us there. And since it had been done so often, and since it was Women's History Month, we decided to do Bull Run in a women-centered lens.
Right.
So we wanted to talk about the women at Bull Run. And we kind of talk about women in the Civil War as well.
Which I thought was actually quite fascinating. Oh, hey, Uncle Brian. So I actually thought that was quite fascinating, that looking at it through the lens of the women that were at Bull Run, because some of the women that were there, you told their stories, right?
Yes.
So we told the story that everybody, who's kind of a little bit of a history fan understands of the Battle of Bull Run, right?
Yes.
So the overall kind of what was happening, people didn't think that this was going to be a big deal, but then you kind of told women's stories in between, and I thought that was really, really interesting.
Well, and what I wanted people to understand is it's just so multifaceted, right? Women are not just operating in one element of the war, right? They're not just nurses, or they're not just wives of soldiers. Like, they're doing everything in warfare. And so I wanted to tell their stories and just give them credit for what's happening. Plus, Bull Run is significant because the first casualty of the Civil War is a woman.
Yep.
And she's still buried there at Bull Run. She's buried on the battlefield. So there's a lot of women stories we could tell. And I think it's important because we do get a lot of like significant figures that come out of the Civil War. Clara Barton, significant, but she gets her start at the first Battle of Bull Run.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to tell the stories of how these women are all coming together and doing their part in the Civil War, even in the very first battle.
And one of the things, before we kind of go into the individual women that we talk about, one of the things that I enjoy, and I've talked a little bit about this on some of the live streams and the podcast, is those battlefields that give you a feel like you're there.
Oh, yeah.
And this is absolutely one of those battlefields that really gives you the feel for Oh yeah, I can totally see how this was, because they have a statue of Stonewall Jackson, which is obviously larger than life, but it's kind of standing there on this one rise with cannons on one side, and then there's the house that you talk about
Yes.
where the first casualty was, with cannons on the other side, and there's this large battlefield in between. You're like, man, this is like. They would just walk straight across in lines, and they would fire at each other.
know.
Just wild how they did it back then. For us now, and this is one of those battlefields. It wasn't massive, not compared to, Yorktown or the battlefield and things like that. But the battlefield itself, I think, was just. I love that open feel, and it really gives you the picture of what it was like.
Sure, it was. It's beautiful. It's run by the National Park Service.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend visiting it. It does have a statue of Stonewall Jackson, and we'll talk about him because that's the significant things. One of the significant things that comes out of. It's first Manassas to us Virginians.
Yeah.
So it's in the city of Manassas. So you'll have two battles of Bull Run, right? The first battle of Bull Run, and sometimes say the Battle of Manassas. You'll hear both. They're kind of used interchangeably. And I use Bull Run for the first one and Manassas for the second one. You can use Manassas for the first one, Bull Run for the second one. It's really it really is a play on words because of the location. But what we did that was significant, and I want people to realize, is how close the proximity was to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So when we visited that battlefield, we drove from Washington, D.C., and it's a 30-minute drive. It's right outside of the city. And this is significant because if you think about the Civil War, and this being the first significant battle of the Civil War, how close they are to Washington, D.C. So this plays into the whole atmosphere at the time, because there was an article that came out in the Union that said march on to Richmond, and they just figured they're going to take their army, the Union's going to take their army and just march on to Richmond. And Richmond at the time is, of course, the capital of the Confederacy. Well, this, motivates the Confederacy to stop their march to Richmond. And Bull Run, Manassas, the significance of that area is the railroad line that leads into Richmond, which is giving supplies to Richmond, to the Confederacy. So that's why they want to defend this area.
So they were really almost there to protect their supply line.
Their supply
line,
line.
Which was the railroad.
And this is also going to significantly help the Confederacy, because this is how they get their troops there quickly, is through that railroad line. They get troops onto cars and able to get them to Manassas, Bull Run, to fight in the battle.
And one of the things that we touched on once or twice actually in the video was, because it was so close to DC, the kind of the DC elite actually came out in like picnic style to watch this battle.
So this first battle, Bull Run, is known as the picnic battle, because you do get these elites, these congressmen, these senators who are bringing their families and their buggies and their picnic blankets and their baskets, and they're setting out to watch the battle. I don't think people are understanding what is going to happen here. Of course they don't. They don't see the significance. I was reading before we started this of how many soldiers from West Point went to the Confederacy, and it's about 290 went to the Confederacy. And you're going to get the superintendent of West Point is Beauregard.
Yeah.
And he's leading the Confederacy at Bull Run. So what you're seeing right now is such a split of the nation. And you're going to get Lee, who, very prestigious in the Army, is going to go to the Confederacy. Beauregard, he's the superintendent of West Point, going to the Confederacy. And you're going to get these soldiers. Now, I had said in the video, like, you're going to get people who have political appointments or buying their commissions. And, yeah, we had great traffic that day because it was like a Sunday morning. But people are not buying their commissions, and what I think people alluded to, like, they're paying for their commissions, and I didn't mean it that way. Buying their commissions politically. Yeah. Like, I'm a senator, I should be a general. I'm a senator, I should be a colonel. So it's like buying them in a political sense. Now, you do get people who actually buy their commissions more in the South maybe than in the North, like Nathan Bedford Forrest, for example,
sure,
who has all that money. He's able to become an officer because he's able to kind of pay for a lot of things. But in the North side, it's more political appointments. And that is what really hurts the Union here, because in this first battle, they're not ready. They don't know how to fight. They don't know how to line up an infantry. They don't understand tactics. They don't take orders well. And the retreat is just a mess. So what's happening is with Claire Barton, so I would talk about the most significant, Red Cross nurse to come out of this battle, is she plays an influential part in that retreat.
Yeah.
So as the Union is retreating and you have injuries, 5,000 casualties during this first battle, and the retreat is just a mess. The walking wounded is where we first start to see this. They're walking back into DC. They don't want to stay in Manassas because they don't want to die, because there's nobody there to get them. There's no ambulances, there's no wagons. All that has left during the battle. And so these walking wounded come back into DC. She first encounters them. She sits with them. She's writing letters with them. She's feeding them. And then about 6 days later, they realize there's still people out there. And they go back towards Manassas and find all these casualties, these people still alive or in makeshift shacks and stuff. And that's when she starts to realize we need more provisions.
So one of the things, we didn't actually go too deep into any of these particular
No, we just brush on
stories.
every kind of couple woman
So
stories.
remind me, so for Clara Barton, right, for someone who doesn't know kind of how significant she was, did she kind of help found basically the earliest versions of the Red Cross?
Yeah, she's the founder of the Red Cross.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's one thing. Like I know we didn't go into the video because I did put that in the video because I'm the editor.
Yes. So we talk about women in almost every facet here. We talk about women spies. Rose Greenhow. Rose Greenhow is seducing Brigadier General McDowell. He is he's the head of the Union Army. She is working for the Confederacy. She lives in D.C. and she's a Southern woman of means. So she's able to wine and dine elite men. And she finds out how many troops they're sending.
Yeah, he basically gives her, troop movements and numbers.
Yes, because she's a woman and he thinks she's dumb. Right. So one of my favorite World War II posters in my office is "Be Mum, She's Not So Dumb."
Right.
Right. It's a World War II poster of a beautiful woman and soldiers around her. And Rose Greenhow using that to her advantage. So she's able to get that number to Beauregard. And when Beauregard knows they're bringing upwards of 30,000 troops, he only has a couple, like 10,000, a little bit over 10,000 that first initially meet the Union, but he's able to get 20,000 there to eventually push back the Union, and it becomes a Confederacy win. So here you get Rose Greenhow. Beauregard gives her credit. He says, because of her, we were able to know how many men were coming and get the men there to fight. So he gives her a lot of credit. So we have her.
And one of the interesting things is too, I mean, even now, just as I'm sitting here thinking about it, the battlefield's big, right? Manassas is a decent size, but for 30,000 people, let's say, on each side.
Yeah, no, it was, 29,000 Union, 32,000 Confederacy.
So think about it. So 60,000 people on this battlefield. Now that I sit here and think about it, that's a boatload of people. I'm trying not to cuss on the live stream, but that's a ton of people on this battlefield. I honestly can't imagine seeing 60,000 people on the field where we were. And one of the things I like about, again, going to places like this is you kind of get that broad, expansive kind of view. From a camera perspective, I like doing things like that. But 60,000 people on this battlefield, I mean, they must have literally been stepping over each other and the dead as they're trying to continue the fight on this battlefield.
Sure. And another thing that's significant about Bull Run, most historians will know, or people who just like to study this, is their uniforms haven't been decided yet.
That's right.
This is not a blue versus gray yet, right? So everyone's kind of wearing their uniform. And because they haven't really separated, you don't know who's friendly and who's not. And people haven't really distinguished, like, well, we're Confederacy, we're Union. They did have battle flags, but when the battle flags were draped and not full flared, like with the wind, they look the same.
Oh, really?
And that's why the Union will eventually the Confederacy will eventually change their flag. But when they're draped, you can't tell whose flag is who. So it becomes this mass chaos. And that's another thing with the retreat from the Union, is because they don't even know what they're doing. They can't see, they can't tell who they're fighting. And there's like a lot of friendly fire, and you're not sure who your enemy is. You can't tell by uniform. You can't tell by language. So it really is just, do I know you? Do I not know you? Are you, what side are you on?
Yeah, and even to kind of go back to some of the women that we talked about. Now, not all of them were there necessarily in a support role. I mean, some of them were there actually, like, fighting right alongside the men. I think you said there were over 400 women that were on the battlefield helping or fighting in some form or fashion.
So at the time, you have a Mary Livermore who is working for the Sanitation Commission, and she estimates there's 400 women who are fighting as men in the war. But nowadays, historians think it's upwards of 1,000.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Women who actually wore the uniform as a male and dressed as a male.
Just got out there to go fight.
And one of them significant is from the First Battle of Bull Run. And I don't think we talk about her in the video.
No,
but,
you talked. I think this is the one you talked about. But I ended up cutting
Emma Edmonds. Sorry, got to get those E's out. She changes her name to Frank Thompson, and she fights under the 2nd Michigan Infantry Company F.
Yeah, and I think one of our commenters, one of our subscribers, Rick, actually brought her up and said, "Hey, what about her?" And I actually replied and it said, "Actually, Jen did talk about her in one of the video clips. It just didn't make the video editor's cut, which happens every now and then, which is another reason why we like to do these podcasts and live streams, so we get to tell you guys a little bit more in detail some of the things that didn't make the 12-minute video."
So she's a significant, interesting story. She is a male for part of the war, and then is captured, and then Frank Thompson is labeled a deserter, so she doesn't want to come back in as a deserter, so she comes back in as a woman and nurses for the rest of the war. But she's the second woman to be recognized by the GAR. So we'll talk about the first woman to be recognized by the GAR. So that's the Grand Army of the Republic. She gets to wear the star and gets a pension. But you do have women who dress as males and keep that identity their entire lives. And so that is Jenny Hodgers. She's the 95th Illinois Company G. She's in 40 battles of the Civil War. She uses the name Albert Cashier. And she was a man before the battle. She assumes the identity of a man before the battle, and she maintains the identity of a man even up until her death. And she claims that she wanted the excitement and she wanted to be a part of the battle. Some people claim she might have been the first, or label her as a trans man because she kept the identity even outside of warfare. So you have women who are pretending to be men, dressing as men, but then you have women who are wearing a dress and they're just, I'm a woman fighter. And the most significant of that is Katie Bromwell. And she was there at the First Battle of Bull Run. She enlists with her husband, and we talk about this.
Yeah, we did.
And it's so funny because her husband, he's a deserter. And I don't need to laugh in the video, but like she doesn't. And she's in the Rhode Island Regiment. She's injured and she helps. She's designated to hold the colors. I say that she might have picked up the colors from someone who had dropped them, but she's actually designated to hold the colors.
And we've talked about kind of the significance of that before and kind of what that means, because really in those battles back then, the colors were important, not just as like a motivating factor, but also to show where the line was.
It's so significant in would we say urban warfare or infantry warfare, because at the time when you don't know uniforms, at least we know our banner, and if we can fight alongside our banner, we know our line, and that's why she's so significant. So she holds the banner high even with Confederacy bullets flying by. She is awarded again, she's discharged from the Union Army. She gets a pension. She wears a star. And she's just significant throughout the Civil War. She stays in until she's injured, I think in 1863, but she's the first woman to receive the GAR star.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was really neat seeing all the different aspects of this. And who was she the one, the pictures that I was showing, who's like she's in like in a dress like with her rifle?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
her.
yeah. Some pretty incredible stories when you think about life back then. But at the same time, these are also, men and women who America was still an early concept for them back then, right? And then it was really more about the states, right? It was like, hey, I'm a Virginian, I'm a
Yeah, and you get again, you remember you're seeing real significance in immigration during this time.
Yeah.
So you get people who are coming to America and really want to identify as American. So they're willing to fight in the Civil War for the opportunity to have the freedom to be an American. So they're very proud of that.
Yeah.
And that's where you get people like Katie Bromwell, Sarah Edma Emmons. Now we talk a little bit. Annie Etheridge, we talk about in the video. She is from the 2nd and 3rd Michigan, 5th Regiment. She's a medic. And so she's participating as a supporter as well, because there are women that will follow their men and they cook for them, right? There's nothing for them at back home.
Yeah, they're following in the support role.
Yeah, unless you had a homestead and land, if your man is going to fight, you go with them. And so you fix uniforms, you nurse them if they get sick.
Yeah.
You make food, and you're kind of following behind in kind of like the camp setting. And that's what Anne Etheridge does. And she's a medic the whole time. And the other person we talk about, which is the casualties, the women casualties at this time, and that is Judith Henry. She's the 84-year-old who's in the house at the top of the hill of Bull Run. That's her home. And the Confederacy comes into her home, goes into the attic as sharpshooters, and her family tries to get her out of the house, tries to put her on a mattress because she's bedridden, and tries to get her out. But can you imagine trying to get her out of the house when you see our video in the middle of a battlefield with 60,000 people?
As there's like cannons going by, there's people having a picnic
84-year-old
over there.
women, and you're trying to carry. So they take her back to the house. And at the time when the Union realizes there's snipers, sharpshooters coming out of the attic, they just bombard the house with artillery. You see the cannons
and they
lined
actually,
up.
there's actually pictures that people went back to that battlefield after the fact, and they took pictures of basically the remains of that house,
Which is
and it's literally like
the frame.
the chimney in a part of the frame.
Yeah. So she's a casualty.
Yeah.
She's the first casualty, happens to be a woman, 84 years old, buried in the front yard. And so that, if you go to Bull Run, her grave is there, her homestead is there, rebuilt, and then you have the statue of Stonewall Jackson. So I say, there's significant things that are coming out of this battle. That name and the motivation and the morale for the Confederacy is the biggest things that's going to come out of this.
And I'm not gonna lie, like the statue's pretty cool looking.
It is. I
mean,
think cooler than Jackson ever really looked in my life.
Yeah, no, he looks like Superman up there. This is not a man of normal proportions that they put on this horse on this pedestal in the middle of the battlefield. Like he looks like he's wearing a superhero outfit, but it really does. It gives you that kind of whole concept of Stonewall Jackson, right? What's the quote? Form
up behind
on Jackson standing there like a stone wall.
Standing like a stone wall.
And it really does give you that feel because he's up on this rise, and out on the battlefield there are the cannons that are lined up off to the side, not too far from him. And if you were a soldier and you saw, your general, sitting on a horse, just kind of sitting there being like, yeah, we're good. We got this. And you're just sitting out in front. You'd probably be pretty motivated too.
Yeah. And it worked in their favor, right? Because I say in the video, I don't know if it's smart or dumb because you are a standing target. If you're not moving, it makes it very easy for someone to aim at you. But what you have happening at this time is when the Confederacy reinforcements are coming.
Yeah.
And so the Union is getting tired. They're not understanding what's happening. They're retreating, and the Confederacy is just bombarding them with more and more fresh men. And Stonewall Jackson stands there. He's injured in the hand. So you see he wraps his hand, he puts his hand on his waist, and he stays on his horse. And even though his brigade loses 50% of their men, which is one of the highest casualties there. They stand there and are able to reinforce people. And yeah, that's the quote right there, Kurt saying it. And it gives, because it works and because the Confederacy wins, the morale that comes out of that for the Confederacy is what really drives and builds the rest of the Civil War for them.
It's a massive turning point for the South. I mean, even the pictures that I pull up of Stonewall Jackson, it's him like going through town and kind of like shaking the hand of a little boy. This is after the battle,
Yeah.
right? Because he is now instantly a hero, right? The myth was created right then and there.
And like I say, most people probably don't even know his first name is Thomas,
right?
Because Stonewall.
I didn't know that. You know.
But so what's happening to women at this time? So what happens, the significance of Stonewall Jackson is Union women are basically like gut punched, right? They're like, how could our men retreat? They're very melancholy. The wind has been taken out of their sails. They hear the opposite, right? They hear the Union has retreated. They hear, this is not going to be an easy battle. Look how close they are to Washington, D.C., and they won this battle, and so they feel very demoralized. Now their men have retreated. Their men are injured. Now President Lincoln has to get more men. He has to train more men. We have to designate new uniforms. And so the Union women feel like the wind has been taken out of their sails. And then you got the Southern women who feel, repurposed.
Sure,
they feel proud.
Oh, of course.
Everybody
wants their home team to win.
Yeah. So this is what you're seeing with the women on either side that is happening out of this battle. We talk about the picnic goers. There's women there. And so they're in the middle of a retreat. They end up in the middle of a battle. So you have women who are seeing firsthand casualties. Again, women stepping up, nursing. And then when we talk about Judith Henry, we talk a lot about homesteading and being left behind in homestead as a woman. If your man goes off to war and you have a home and land to maintain, you're doing that on your own. And a lot of times these homes, especially if they are in a strategic point during any battle during the Civil War, they can be commandeered by military of either side as headquarters. And women are then, you're washing and cleaning and cooking for whatever soldiers are living in that house. And you're hoping that your house and your land survive the battle. And you see a lot of that throughout the Civil War. A significant person is Gettysburg, the woman who runs the cemetery, who's pregnant and digs all the graves for the soldiers.
And there was one kind of famous woman that came out of the Civil War, not from the Battle of Bull Run, but you mentioned her at the very end, the only woman ever to receive the Medal of Honor.
Yes.
Or to have been awarded the Medal of Honor. And there was some
doctor.
The doctor. And I thought there was some very interesting history on her. She'd be someone who'd be, an interesting historical character to kind of explore in the future.
We talked about her at when we do the Civil War Museum in Richmond.
Okay.
The medal is there.
Oh, I don't think I remember
And
that.
she dresses like a man.
Yeah.
And that's kind of significant,
Yes, that's
right?
right.
Remember, she said, these are my clothes. Because they would be, why do you wear men's clothes? And she's like, these are my clothes.
Yeah. And there was, she was a topic of conversation all the way up into the 1970s because there was people that didn't think that she should have been awarded the Medal of Honor because she was never, I don't think she was ever actually in battle or ever was part of the military. But it was awarded to her and then kind of sort of removed. But then I think it was President Carter that came back and eventually kind of made it official. Very interesting. Something I'd like to explore.
Yeah,
in the future.
we'll talk more about her story in another podcast because it deserves time.
Yeah.
But I think what's also very significant about that is she is still the only woman to receive the Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
Even today.
That's what surprised me. So you're right. That's definitely a topic for another time.
Yes.
So,
but thank you.
So if you paid attention even a little bit in school, then you probably know that the Battle of Bull Run, as we talked about, kicked off the American Civil War. And you might even know that this is where the indomitable Stonewall Jackson got his name. Yes, the saying goes, form, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. But what they didn't teach in school was that at this epic battle, there were women in the thick of the fight standing right next to the men. Women like Clara Barton, Annie Etheridge, or Katie Brownell were not merely supporting, but also rallying soldiers, carrying the flag and bearing arms next to their fellow fighters on this bloody American battlefield. These women broke social norms or ran towards the danger that most today can barely imagine. They were the women of Bull Run. So thank you for listening to the Talk with History podcast, and please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this, share the video, share the live stream or the podcast, shoot them a text and tell them to look us up, because we rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to take just like a 2-minute break here on intermission. We've got the double feature as promised, and just give us 1 minute. 2 minutes, and we're gonna jump into the next topic. Don't worry, History Treehouse, we got a
whole nother
20-30 minutes coming up. We're gonna take like a 30-60 second break, so just give us 1 minute while I set some things up here. All right, we are back from our intermission. Thanks for hanging with us, and welcome to part 2 of our double feature tonight. So, for those who are just joining us, welcome to Talk with History. I am your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights into our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Now, before we get into our main topic tonight, please give this live stream a like, share it. If you're watching with us on Facebook, you guys can share it on Facebook as well, because we are trying to live stream to multiple locations. If you're listening to the podcast after the live stream, please feel free to give us a review wherever you listen, and then just give us a shout out wherever you can, because the History Channel can't be the only one being well known in the history media world, because we're coming for them. So, second part of our double feature here. Now, what's our second topic for our audience tonight?
So we're still, in Women's History Month. So we're still doing women-centered stories, but we're talking about the lost colony of Roanoke, and the first child born to the colonists was a girl.
That's right,
Virginia Dare.
Virginia Dare. Now, for the uneducated people who didn't pay attention to history class in high school and in college, tell me about the lost colony, because you make it sound like these people got here before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock.
Yeah, and this would be a great drunk history, because it's really awesome. So this is Jamestown is 1607, Plymouth is 1620. This is happening in 1580s.
Yep.
Right now, it's not the first colony really here in America, because you got St. Augustine in 1565.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening, right, is the Spanish are settling in Florida in 1565 and starting to build up their navy and starting to find gold and starting to find resources. And Queen Elizabeth is made aware of the power that the Spanish are getting from their American colony from Sir Walter Raleigh. He approaches her and says, you know, the Spanish are really getting a lot of stuff over there. We should get over there. Maybe if we put a colony a little north of Florida, they at first wanted to go to the Chesapeake. Maybe we can commandeer those ships.
Right.
Maybe we can stop those ships.
So he's trying to convince the queen, like, hey, let me get out there, do a little swashbuckling, and I'll bring you back some cash.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, yeah, I do see them getting some resources, and they are becoming a world power that I got to kind of watch and be nervous about. If you think you can do this, Raleigh, go for it. I'll support you.
Yeah.
And so in 1585, they make their way to what is present day North Carolina, to Roanoke Island. And Roanoke is, if you go to the Outer Banks, there's these kind of islands that are basically thin islands on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And there's an inlet between two of them that'll take you into a closer in island, and that's Roanoke. So it's not an outside island like Hatteras,
right,
but it's more inland. So I bet they felt a little safer and protected.
Yeah, there's more protection. There's just the natural, land.
And
right
it was
there.
a bigger island, so when they got to the land, it probably felt more stable. And so in 1585, he gets there. He sees the first peoples that are there that they encounter, the Algonquin, and it's really a friendly exchange. They are, they're amazed to learn about each other. They're amazed to learn each other's culture. They trade. They learn. And so what is interesting is there was this mutual friendly relationship, and they build earthworks. So they dig in and they build some earthworks there. They build some forts there. Now these are just men that came over from England, and they draw pictures of the Algonquin, and they take one of them with them, Manteo, to come back with them, and they go back to England with him. A year later, in 1587, another group of men come to Roanoke, to the fort, bring Manteo back. The Algonquin are there. And what happens this time is winter comes upon them, and they start to get hungry.
Yeah.
They want the Algonquin to trade with them. The Algonquin are trying to feed their own people, and the British get upset, and they attack them and kill some of their leaders. And the Algonquin fight back and kill some of them. Well, the English are kind of just hunkering down when Sir Francis Drake kind of comes up the coast and sees them and says, would you like to come back? You need to ride back to England. And they're like, yeah, let's all go back to England. So they take them back to England. But Raleigh doesn't want to give up. Raleigh is like, we really have to establish a colony. We need to bring men and women. We need to start to build homes. We need to establish a colony in Roanoke. So he enlists John White to become the first governor of Roanoke. And John White gets together a group of people to go out to Roanoke Island. And I think it's 80 men, 17 women, and 10 children. And one of those children is John White's daughter, Eleanor White. And she's married to Ananias Dare. Ananias Dare is a bricklayer, so his labor is needed, wanted,
it's
valuable.
And one of the interesting things too, right? So this whole Lost Colony area, it's a national park.
It's a national park.
It's run by the national park.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've got a great little center that kind of tells the whole story, right? There's a little theater. We sat there with kids. And one of the cool things that I actually kind of liked, they had this room off to the side near the theater where it was playing. We show it in the video. There's like kind of shadows, silhouettes of the Queen, and what I think was maybe Sir Walter Raleigh at one point, and then someone else. So you can kind of see him trying to convince the Queen. So that was neat. I used that in the video, kind of drive home a point. But one of the things that I really liked that you pointed out was they showed a map where all these settlers were from in London.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually show you what parts of London where Sir Walter Raleigh lived, and then basically where he recruited from around the greater London area, got him on a ship and said, hey, let's go, settle the new world. Probably with promises of, I don't know, the new land,
Milk and honey and
right?
gold.
And then they ventured their way out.
Yes. So they hit land in July of 1587. And I'll tell you why we know all of this as a fact. And then Virginia Dare is born August 18th, 1587.
Yeah, which means John White's daughter came over while she was pregnant.
While she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And she was heavily pregnant
Oof.
when they hit land. She's baptized 2 days later on August 20th. And they find the old earthworks that had been left by Sir Walter Raleigh.
Which are still there.
They're still there. And they kind of fix up the fort, and they build the homes for people. And they're starting to kind of get the lay of the land. And the Algonquins still kind of mad at them. But they're working it out. They're trying to work it out. But they realize, fall is coming, winter's coming, that they don't have enough supplies. So they ask their governor, John White, to go back to England and bring back supplies. And he's hesitant, but of course he's like, absolutely, we want this colony to work.
He doesn't want to leave him there. I mean, his daughter's there and his granddaughter. Right?
She's young, a couple months old.
Yeah.
But he does. He goes back to England. Now, the unfortunate circumstance that happens is England goes to war with Spain.
Yeah, as soon as John White gets over there and he shows up, he's like, "Hey, I got a couple things I need." They're like, "Hang on a second, we just got into a war with Spain."
Yeah, and we need every ship. So
including that one you just came
back on.
Give me that ship there, John White. We got to go fight the Spanish.
And so John White spends the next 3 years trying to get a ship. And that's another of the conversations in the silhouettes you see in there is he's pleading with everybody to help him find a ship to get back to the colony. And he eventually does, but it's 3 years later.
Yeah.
And he actually lands on Roanoke on Virginia Dare's birthday, her third birthday, August 18th, 1590. And nobody's there.
Now, they had kind of worked out a system.
Yes.
That, said where they basically told him, like, hey, if we have to leave, here's what we're going to do.
So there was discussion about leaving because they couldn't find the resources there. And if you go to Roanoke, you'll see it's an island.
Yeah.
Right. So
there's no fresh water.
There's no fresh water.
There's no rivers running through there.
There might be some game, but probably limited.
Yeah.
And so they initially wanted to land in the Chesapeake, like I had said, but their pilot of their ship had taken them further south.
Yeah.
And then he said he was afraid to go up to the Chesapeake because he thought a storm was coming in. So they had always talked about maybe going up to the Chesapeake. So that was one option. They had also said we might go further inland from Roanoke into North Carolina. That was another option. And they had always talked about going down to Croatoa.
Yep.
And Croatoa is modern day Hatteras. So that's on that outside islands a little bit more, and that the Croatoan people live there. So when John White gets to the fort and everything has been taken down, it's not as if this was burned down.
Yeah, there was no burned char. There wasn't it wasn't in rubble and burnt
not
down.
Not like a battle, like someone had came and destroyed everything.
Yep.
Everything had been taken down and moved and left. So people were taking all their resources. And in the middle of the fort on a post was the word carved into the post, Croatoan, the whole word. And then on a tree closer to the edge of the water was CRO.
Yep.
Like someone was going to carve Croatoan, but they carved CRO. And then that was on a tree, and in the fort was the post. So there are theories of what happened to the lost colony. Were they attacked by the Algonquin or any other First Peoples, and they were all killed and massacred? But again, John White found no evidence of destroying of the area, and there were no graves found. No bodies found, no graves found. People talk about disease. The disease come in and wipe them all out. Again, no graves found, no homes are left behind. So more than likely, people believe that they did move. And of one of those three places. They went up to the Chesapeake, to where the Jamestown colony was founded eventually, inland to North Carolina, or south to Hatteras.
He eventually tried to go to those spots.
So he tried to go to Croatoa,
Right?
Because that's where they said they were going. That's Hatteras. That's a little bit further down of the Outer Banks. But again, a storm rolls in, and there is still fear, right? This is early navigation, naval navigation.
And one of the things you mentioned too was that, I mean, that whole Hatteras area eventually became, known as the graveyard of the Atlantic for a reason.
Yes.
Because people were constantly getting in shipwrecks out there because the sandbars were constantly shifting and
the
changing
shoals.
and all this stuff. So the fact that they could kind of get in and out as many times as these guys actually did, especially back then, was actually pretty incredible.
Yes.
Now, their draft probably wasn't as deep as, larger ships when they came along later.
Yes.
But
it's still a scary area.
It's still a scary area. Like,
navigate.
It's very easy to run aground. And then
Before lighthouses.
Then you're stuck there.
And so they don't go south looking for them. And John White has to go back to England. Never comes back again. Never able to come back again. Never able to find his daughter, his granddaughter. And no one knows what happened to the colony. It is the lost colony. Now, you do get Sir Walter Raleigh, who will eventually go down to Hatteras and look for them.
Yep.
But no evidence of the lost colony is ever found. So it's just an amazing story to tell. And then to honor Virginia Dare. And this is, like I said, this is how we know all of this, is because when John White came back, he was able to say, my granddaughter was born at Roanoke, and we baptized her on August 20th. And all of that history survives through him, because if the colony was lost and he never came back, then no one would have known.
And even Virginia Dare, I mean, isn't it like Dare County?
Yes.
That's down there. So all of these characters,
and Manteo is the name of the city.
Is the name of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these historical characters, like, I mean, they live on, to this day. The city is still called Manteo.
Mm-hmm.
The county is still Virginia Dare County. And visiting the park itself was actually kind of just a pleasant surprise. It's a little bit of a beachy feel to it. We actually went over and we saw the theater that they have there. And one of the cool things that we saw at the theater was that plaque.
Yes, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt watched a production of The Lost Colony on August 18th. It was like 1930 something, but that's Virginia Dare's birthday.
Yeah, and so just the fact that FDR was there in Roanoke at the Lost Colony, watching a play of this, like, I mean, this has been a part of American culture for quite, for forever for us.
Yeah, and the name Virginia Dare kind of lives on.
That I thought was kind of interesting. It's this name that has this kind of mystique to it.
Yeah, it's kind of used for groups, feminism. It's used for rally cries. It's a kind of, it takes on its own meaning in different ways. But Virginia Dare's name has some symbolism to a new beginning, fresh start. Something. It's just very interesting that name has gone on. And even the garden there by the fort has a statue of what an adult Virginia Dare would look like.
Yeah, we didn't end up going into the garden because it was a little pricey for a family of 5.
Yeah.
But apparently that's one of those places where if you live close to it, if you go during the holiday season, they'll do like lights or Christmas lights or things like that. So it was like the Elizabethan Gardens or something. And then the town of Manteo was actually really nice. We went down there and walked around. Like, you could probably spend an entire day there just walking around doing kind of the typical touristy things. And then there was a ship, kind of, I don't know, it was a recreation of the same kind of ship.
That
they would have brought over.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of parked across the way. We were down there relatively early in the season.
Yeah, and that will be open during the regular season. It really reminded me, I think Kurt was talking about, or Peter was talking about the Cape Hatteras being so dangerous. It reminds me of Ocracoke. So if you hit Hatteras, you can take the ferry across to Ocracoke, and Ocracoke is where Blackbeard was killed. And again, you get this dangerous shoals and ship area, and pirates used it to their advantage, and that's why you get Blackbeard is very active in that area. Roanoke reminded me of Ocracoke.
Yeah.
It is a neat little island. It's very, boutiques and stuff, antique stores. And so you can spend the day in Manteo and walk around and you can see the National Park Service. It's free for visitors, and you can see the Lost Colony stage where they do a production of the whole Queen Elizabeth talking to Raleigh and the colonists coming over and their lives before they send John White back, and then what could have happened to them. That production has been going on for
a long time, and the theater is neat. If you go back and watch our video, because the setting behind it is basically the beach, overlooking kind of the bay there across where Hatteras is across from there. And even Kirk says there used to be a Virginia Dericola. And so there's lots of good discussion here in the chat.
Oh, Outlander. Do they go to Ocracoke and Outlander? I have to watch. I had to learn how to say Ocracoke right. You have to think of the vegetable and Coca-Cola.
That's
Ocracoke.
right. That's right. But it was just a fun visit, an easy visit. If you're ever in that area, easy to find. And even the sign kind of out front, as you're kind of getting up to the national park, it was like, it says, the birthplace of the first, English colonists, American-born English colonists or something like that.
Yes.
So it was just kind of a pleasant little surprise, and they do a good job inside the national park, inside the museum there.
They have a great video.
Great video, great for kids. It's very hands-on.
Yes.
And we will, it was just kind of, again, just a pleasant surprise. And
Yes.
the Lost Colony, I just kind of love the whole, like, what would you say? Mystery with history?
Yeah. Mystery with history.
So, again, super fun. And for those of you guys joining us tonight, I really do appreciate it. So for most people, the Lost Colony may evoke images of a TV show or a movie. Travelers stranded on a desert island somewhere. You can just picture it in your mind. However, for those of you who study history, perhaps here with us tonight, you will know about the real-life travelers from England looking for a new life and new land of opportunities. And while we may never know what actually happened to those English settlers of the 1500s, we can look back and appreciate the path they forged for those that came later and settled this great land that we now call home. So thank you for listening to the Talk with History podcast. And please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast or this video, please share it with them, especially if you think today's topic would interest a friend. Shoot them a text and tell them to look us up, because we rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. That is super interesting. Who wrote that?
About what?
Andy Griffith started out acting in the Lost Colony play.
No way.
That is so
I'm
neat.
gonna share that here.
That
That's
he
really
started
neat.
his career there.
Oh, look, Doug said that too. Doug McCliverty.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't know that.
That is super neat. Yeah, like I said, that has been going on for a long time. It's actually kind of like both of you have stated, it's kind of a prestigious place to act.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that. Again, this is, me just kind of not being an East Coaster by nature, and not growing up out here. But I work with people, that are from North Carolina, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Lost Colony, Virginia Dare." Like I grew up learning about all that stuff. But that's super interesting that he started there. What a neat piece of history.
I know, and it's open for you to walk around the stage and everything. I mean, you can't go on the stage, but you can walk around the whole playhouse. The kids loved it, and it's opened up. But we were there kind of off season, and so the playhouse wasn't going when we were there. But I would love to see a play there.
Yeah, that's really neat. So then Doug said that,
He went to Broadway.
and then he went to Broadway and did Time for Sergeants. Yeah. How
Yeah.
interesting.
I noticed when we did the video and I shared it, there's a lot of young actors
that's
who
cool.
talk about, working on the Lost Colony.
Yeah.
Oh, you think he's buried on
We'll
Roanoke?
have to look that up.
We'll have to look that up because we'll
Yeah.
have to go there.
I'm surprised we
I
didn't
didn't know
catch that
Andy
when we
Griffith was
went down.
there.
Doug may have just found us a future video.
Doug, I love my classic movie stars. I love Andy Griffith.
That's really neat.
If you guys have any other questions, we're here to answer anything. It was an easy drive for us again, Peter, to go there because I think we went off season.
Yeah.
So we got right down into Roanoke, no problem, no
It was
traffic.
surprisingly warm that day.
Yeah, we had great weather that day.
Yeah, we got lucky. In fact, a lot of the shops in Manteo weren't even open because it was kind of just on the late part of the off season or early part of the tourist season.
Yeah, and so when we talk about that, we mean like the Outer Banks. This is like where people come to travel and vacation, the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's where it's all located.
Yeah.
Being up Virginia, I grew up in the story and the war between the states.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Jensen.
A lot of folks probably from North Carolina and Virginia are familiar with this stuff.
Yes.
Family estate. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we'll have to look that up.
Huh. I wonder if they'll let us on if it's on a family estate. Maybe Andy Griffith's one of the graves you can't go visit. I think he might be.
Oh man, we got some good conversation going on in the chat this
I
time
know.
around.
We think it would go into the Biltmore. Definitely want to do that because we're
Yeah.
close to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then Danny Thomas of Wendy's came up with the idea for Mayberry from his car breaking down.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, Danny Thomas is not from. You mean Danny Thomas from St. Jude? So the actor, Danny Thomas. Pirate Connection.
Yeah. Who
Yeah.
doesn't love pirate history?
Yeah, Peter, there's a lot of Pirate Connection. Like if you watch our Ocracoke video.
Yeah, we've got
We talk
two or
all
three.
about
We've got two or three.
And even and
Videos from there.
I'll post it on Instagram. When we were in Manteo, they have a big pirate statue, and I talked to it.
Yeah.
And it said to watch Walk with History on
Yeah,
YouTube.
I don't think I ended up using that. But
Yeah, no, I'll post it on Instagram because
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. But so they probably also embrace their pirate history there. I think a lot of the Outer Banks embrace their pirate history there.
oh, there we go. See, there you go. Rick coming in with the good facts there. People were talking about DNA evidence and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I've been seeing again when I posted about the lost colony, there were a lot of archaeological, digs and that they moved to Hatteras Island.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, amongst the theories of battle or mass disease and and dying or moving, the moving is the one that people have really gone with for what happened to the lost colony.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Doug said that. So Andy Griffith, he died in Manteo. How interesting.
Oh wow.
Died from a heart attack at coastal home in Manteo, Roanoke Island, Dare County. There you go. Huh.
Wow, within 5 hours of his death. I bet they just don't want the publicity.
That's crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Doug.
Doug, I had no idea. That is super cool. Okay, we got to go there now.
All right. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us tonight for the live stream. We really do. This is just super fun for us for you guys to join us. We try to do this every Thursday night. Every now and then we do pre-record one of these things to use it for a live stream.
And like this week we
So-
did too because last week I was in Washington, D.C. for work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we still work 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah, and we'll split this up into 2 podcasts too. So if you guys actually do listen to the podcast, I'll edit it up and kind of add some other stuff into it. But doing these live streams is super fun. So thank you guys for joining us again tonight, and perhaps we will see you again next week.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.